Peacemaker has just finished its first season on HBO. It's already been confirmed that season 2 will be made as well. It's a sequel spin-off series from the Suicide Squad, focusing on John Cena's Peacemaker. So, like the Suicide Squad, it takes place in the DC cinematic universe, or whatever it's called. Like the Suicide Squad, it was made by James Gunn, and it's actually kind of accidental that it even got made in the first place. Gunn apparently wrote the whole season during lockdown, strictly because he was bored out of his mind. And he didn't expect anyone would actually be interested in filming it. But they did. Warner Brothers was interested. And let me tell you, the result is about 10 times better than it had any right to be. Story-wise, it takes place after the Suicide Squad. Peacemaker survived his wound, because comic books, gets out of the hospital and is assigned to another mission. This time around, he and a bunch of Amanda Waller's agents have to stop a plot involving aliens trying to take over the human population. And as that is going on, Peacemaker himself is also struggling with his identity, with how he would like to view himself and how he viewed himself until recently, versus how he increasingly realizes he actually is. We flash back multiple times to that fantastic line from Rick Flag, his final line in the Suicide Squad, "Peacemaker, what a joke." And on top of all of that, he's also grappling with his relationship to his father, who happens to be a white supremacist supervillain. Tonally speaking, it's kind of like The Boys meets Guardians of the Galaxy. The Boys, because it's very adult, it's very graphic in terms of sexual content, swearing, ultra-violence, drinking, and it also pokes a lot of fun at superheroes themselves and the genre as a whole. And Guardians, because ultimately, underneath the juvenile jokes and the overblown violence, it's about a bunch of fucked up people coming together for a greater cause and for a greater purpose, and in the process trying and becoming just a little bit better. And I think that last aspect is what surprised me most about the show. How human and serious it can be at times. It's not just comedy all the time, although there's a lot of it, but there are also some really touching and some really somber moments in it. I really like the way that the Peacemaker is drawn as a pretty complex character, very much a victim of his own upbringing and circumstances, someone who also carries a great guilt with him and struggles to leave it behind, kind of get free from all of that past and become a person of his own. John Cena is unexpectedly amazing in the role, nailing the whole range required, from the humor and silliness through just being a badass physical performer to tapping into some real emotions. The supporting cast is great through and through, and like Peacemaker, they can also be wacky but also surprisingly serious at times. My favorite ones were Vigilante, the best friend sidekick who has really strong Deadpool energy, Adebayo, who's just great as this sort of audience insert, the person who's constantly exasperated at all the nonsense that's going on, and finally Judo Master, who's just plain ridiculous. He's entertaining as all shit, even though he doesn't make any sense. Now, character work takes center stage, and that's a good thing, but the general plot is also pretty decent as well. From pacing standpoint, it's a solid mixture of slower dialogue moments and fast-paced action, which, by the way, I think puts to shame some of, actually a lot of the stuff that Marvel has been doing with their Disney Plus shows set in the Marvel universe. The fight choreography here is much closer to things like Daredevil than, let's say, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The humor is great. There's one joke, there's a cameo in the last episode at the end, which was the hardest I've laughed at TV show probably ever. So unexpected and just so bloody brilliant. The special effects are fantastic. The opening to each episode is that's a dance number done to it's set to a song called "Do You Really Want to Taste It" by a band named Wigwam, which very quickly joined my Spotify library permanently. The opening is just brilliantly bizarre, and I never skipped it once. You have to check it out on YouTube. And also on the topic of music, like many other things that James Gunn does, the soundtrack is full of absolute bangers, this time around tapping mostly into glam rock and classic heavy metal. I mean, overall, it's just a very, very good show through and through. It's rather crass and unapologetic in its brand of humor. It can be disgustingly violent, and it is definitely silly at times, but it's doing all of those things consciously, and the whole package just works. As I said at the beginning, it is somehow much better than it should be. I checked it out just out of curiosity, and I stayed for the entire ride with pleasure. And I am now looking forward to the next season. Really great stuff.